I remember a time when the earth beneath my feet held more meaning than the latest stock tickers, when every furrowed line in the soil was a promise, and every seed planted a prayer for tomorrow. I'm Daniel Whitmore, and once upon a time, I believed that success meant conquering skyscrapers, tech markets, and every boardroom in the country. I recall those days of strutting across polished floors, delivering speeches that resonated in grand auditoriums, and watching the numbers on my bank account grow as swiftly as my ambition. But in that incandescent blaze of corporate conquests, I lost sight of something essential. I lost the simple magic of being present, of nurturing life from the ground up, and ultimately, I lost the garden I once adored. I remember the garden vividly, a small patch behind our old brick house where my daughter and I would spend warm summer afternoons. It was a sanctuary that bridged the divide between a child's boundless wonder and a man's steadfast resolve. In that garden, she'd laugh as she dived into the soft earth, her little hands busy patting down the dirt over freshly planted sunflower seeds. I'd help her arrange the seeds in neat rows, whispering promises that these flowers would someday shine as bright as her smile. Back then, the only wealth I cared about was the feeling of the sun warming my face and the scent of freshly turned soil filling my senses. It was a language without words, a quiet conversation between nature and heart. Yet somewhere along the way, ambitions grew taller than the sunflowers ever could. I became ensnared by the allure of success, private jets, sprawling office towers, high-stakes deals, and the relentless hum of market fluctuations. I constructed an empire brick by brick, deal by deal, and in the process, every celebration, every triumph was punctuated by a constant buzz from my phone, a reminder of the relentless pace of modern wealth. Birthdays, anniversaries, and the quiet moments of life were shoved aside, traded for conference calls and investment strategies. I was present in boardrooms and absent in every quiet, tender moment that called for my attention. One day, as I was buried under a mountain of reports and deals, my assistant casually mentioned that a seemingly insignificant piece of paper had been signed, a clause I hadn't even read. That paper was the key to a decision I now grapple with. The deed to my childhood home and the garden that was once my dearest treasure had been donated to create a community space. At the time, I let it slip through with nothing more than a passing nod, assuming it was just another bureaucratic formality, another tax advantage. I never imagined how deeply this oversight would shape my remaining years. The turning point came unexpectedly. I found myself driving through a part of town that stirred memories of a life long left behind. Curiosity tugged at me until I could no longer resist. Parking my luxurious car in an overgrown lot, I stepped out into a landscape both foreign and achingly familiar. The garden looked wild and unruly, its former order surrendered to a rebellious tangle of weeds and wildflowers. And there, in the heart of that unkempt wilderness, I discovered a young boy, barefoot and brimming with energy, squatting amongst vibrant tomato plants. His laughter, so pure and unfiltered, echoed around me like a soft summer breeze. "Hey, mister," the boy called out, a mischievous grin playing on his lips. "You lost something?" His voice cut through the cacophony of my inner turmoil with the simplicity of a child's question. I couldn't help but smile, even as a pang of loss tightened my chest. "I suppose I might be," I replied, half joking, half searching for an anchor. His response was immediate and candid. "I'm planting tomatoes. This is our community garden now. Some rich guy donated it so we could have a place to grow things." I paused, my mind racing to reconcile the reality before me with the memory of my own lost garden. It was as if a veil had been lifted. I wandered through rows of wild growth, each unruly sprout a testament to what remained of the garden I once tended. I hesitated until, at last, I began to help the boy pull out the stubborn weeds. My hands, used to the feel of a polished desk and the click of expensive gadgets, now relearned the subtle art of connecting with earth. I remembered every nuance of the work, the need to dig just enough to reach the roots without undoing the tender seeds, the satisfaction of a cleaned-up row that awaited the promise of new growth. The physical labor stirred long-dormant memories of my daughter's tiny fingers, sticky with the grime of freshly turned soil, of afternoons filled with the hopeful energy of youth. The boy, with the unabashed honesty of a child, continued to chatter away. My grandma gets seeds every spring. And, on Sundays, a lot of us come by, neighbors, kids, even dogs, to plant, water, and just talk. It's like the garden talks back to us. His words struck a chord deep within me. For so long, I had been engrossed in numbers and strategies that I'd forgotten the quiet conversations that the earth offered. I recalled the slow rhythm of life outside the city's relentless pulse. The simple pleasure of sitting on our old porch swing as dusk turned the sky into a canvas of vibrant hues. The soft murmurs of nature intermingling with the laughter of our family. But those days were overrun by meetings, deals, and frantic schedules that left little room for feeling, for genuine connection. In a moment that will forever be seared in my memory, I stumbled upon a weathered wooden marker half buried in the soil near the spot where sunflowers had once soared skyward. Faded letters read, "Dad plus Lily, Sunflowers 94. The inscription stirred an avalanche of memories. My daughter Lily's giggles, her joyful exclamations as she raced around, her playful defiance against time itself. It all surged back, unbidden and overwhelming. I knelt there, the sensation of a cold, rough wood grounding me more effectively than any boardroom or corporate achievement ever had. I could almost hear her small voice demanding, "Faster, Daddy." "They're catching us," in the distance, as if echoing from a life I once cherished but had nearly forgotten. That marker, insignificant to most, encapsulated the essence of what I had lost along the way. I had believed that legacy was etched in towering structures, in the annals of corporate success and technological breakthroughs. In that moment, I realized that true legacy wasn't measured by public acclaim or the numbers in an account. It was measured by the intimate, nurturing gestures that bind generations together. It was in the simple act of planting a seed, of taking a moment to listen, of exchanging a smile with a stranger, and in the shared experience of tending to something that grows slowly, with tender care. I spent hours in that garden, not as a billionaire checking markets or signing contracts, but as a man reconnecting with the essence of who I truly was. The community around me, once strangers to my towering reputation, now welcomed me with open arms, inviting me to be part of their shared journey of growth. I listened to their stories. The woman who had lost her husband yet found solace in the earth, the man who had planted a garden after years of inner turmoil, and the children whose laughter seemed to breathe life into every corner of this reclaimed space. Each story was a thread in the intricate tapestry of this unexpected sanctuary. As days turned into weeks, I returned to the garden again and again, shedding the layers of opulence and pretense that had come to define my former self. I began to understand that life's true wealth wasn't measured in dollars or market shares, but in the richness of shared experiences and the connections that nourish the heart. I started actively participating in the community garden, organizing days when neighbors could come together, planting not only tomatoes and sunflowers, but also compassion and hope. The garden had become more than just a patch of reclaimed earth. It was a living metaphor for recovery, redemption, and the enduring power of small, meaningful acts. One particularly radiant morning, as I knelt beside a row of budding marigolds, I found myself reflecting on the paradox of my existence. For decades, I had chased after the shimmering illusion of success, driven by a need to validate my worth through achievements and the endless pursuit of wealth. But here in the quiet interplay of light and shadow, among the whispering leaves and the gentle hum of life reawakening, I discovered that there was a wealth far richer and more fulfilling than any bank balance could ever provide. I thought of the countless missed birthdays, the endless hours lost to work, and the many opportunities squandered to simply be present with those I loved. The irony was not lost on me. Here I was, a man who had once fashioned an empire from nothing, now rediscovering that the simple act of tending a garden could mend the fractures of a life divided by ambition and regret. I even recalled how I'd once ridiculed the notion of getting your hands dirty, a phrase I now recognized as a metaphor for engaging with the raw, imperfect fabric of life. It wasn't long before the garden started to work its own magic on me. Every new sprout, every budding flower, was a reminder that growth was inevitable, resilient, and wonderfully unpredictable. I began to see beauty in the imperfection of nature, the way some plants grew crookedly yet possessed an undeniable charm, how the weeds, despite their unruliness, held their own form of wild beauty, unbound by the constraints of convention. I started sharing stories with my neighbors, recounting how I had once been defined by boardrooms and business deals, and how a forgotten garden taught me that the true value of life lay in its quiet moments of genuine connection. One afternoon, a soft drizzle began to fall as I sat on an old, creaking bench near the garden's edge. The rain was gentle, each drop caressing the earth as if to wash away the remnants of a life too busy to feel. A kindly old woman approached, her eyes kind and reflective. "You know," she said softly, "sometimes the world forces us to remember what really matters. That garden of yours, once a secret place for a father and daughter, it's now a refuge for all of us who've lost our way." Her words resonated deeply, echoing truths I had long buried beneath layers of success and neglect. I could only nod, grateful for her simple wisdom. In the evenings, as the sun dipped below the horizon and cast a warm, amber glow over the garden, I found myself striking up conversations with people whose lives had taken paths entirely different from mine. There was a young man who had left an abusive home to seek solace in community work, the retired teacher who planted flowers in memory of lost students, and several others whose struggles and triumphs wove themselves into the vibrant fabric of the garden story. With each shared tale, my own narrative slowly transformed from one of loss and neglect into a story of rediscovery, reconciliation, and hope. I began to document my experiences, not with numbers or charts, but with handwritten notes on scraps of paper, sketches of the garden's hidden corners, and photographs capturing moments of unfiltered human connection. Late at night, as I reviewed these humble mementos, I realized that I was piecing together the fragments of a legacy that had been nearly forgotten. It wasn't the legacy of million-dollar deals or groundbreaking innovations. It was the legacy of family, community, and the quiet dignity of tending to life's simpler joys. The garden had become my redemption, a reminder that even in the twilight of life, there was always time to sow new beginnings. Over time, the garden thrived not just as a physical space, but as a sanctuary of memories and lessons passed down through the community. I found myself leading workshops on sustainable gardening and occasionally on the art of reconnecting with one's roots, both literal and metaphorical. I started inviting people over for humble dinners under the open sky, sharing stories of both corporate boardroom battles and the gentle resilience of nature. And in every conversation, every shared laugh over a steaming cup of home-brewed tea, I slowly began to appreciate that in nurturing life, I was also nurturing my own spirit. Some nights, as I walked home under a sky splattered with stars, I would pause and think about how drastically my life had altered. I had amassed fortunes, won accolades, and earned the admiration of many. Yet, standing in that garden under the vast, compassionate cosmos, I experienced a fullness that no boardroom ever offered. I came to see that every achievement I had ever celebrated seemed transient compared to the timeless dance of the moonlight over the garden. The simple act of watering a lonely plant, the humble routine of pulling a stubborn weed, had woven itself into the fabric of my days in a way that outshined any fleeting corporate triumph. I started reflecting on my past actions with a bittersweet clarity, the moments when I chose profit over presence, and how the relentless chase for success had cost me dearly in terms of human connection. I recalled countless missed calls from my daughter, her voice a ghost in the background of my busy schedule, and the rarity of a heartfelt conversation that wasn't interrupted by the ping of yet another notification. I began to realize that true success was not in the fleeting applause of boardrooms, but in the quiet, shared moments that nourished the soul, the time spent laughing with a stranger, the solace of a heartfelt conversation, and the joy of watching a child's eyes light up as they discovered the wonder of a blooming flower. There were days when the garden reminded me of what I had once been, a wide-eyed dreamer unburdened by expectations, a man who found solace in the simple, unpredictable beauty of nature. And there were days when I felt the weight of every lost moment, every quiet goodbye to a time when I was truly present. Yet, in that dance of light and shadow, of joy and regret, I unearthed a humble truth, that life, in all its complexity, was not measured in balance sheets or accolades, but in the legacy of love, community, and the small yet profound acts of kindness that resonate far longer than any fortune. One crisp autumn evening, as the leaves began to dress themselves in fiery hues of orange and red, I sat on that old bench once more. The garden was abuzz with life. Children played hide and seek among the thriving plants. Elders exchanged stories with a gentle reverence for days gone by, and every corner of that space pulsed with the promise of new beginnings. In that moment, the garden wasn't just a symbol of what I had lost. It was a celebration of what could be regained when one dared to remember the beauty in the overlooked. I shared my story with anyone who would listen, not as a cautionary tale, but as a personal confession, a reminder that sometimes the hardest person to forgive is oneself. I spoke of missed birthdays, neglected moments, and the relentless pursuit of an image that ultimately felt hollow compared to the simple integrity of a life well lived. And as I spoke, I saw eyes soften, smiles emerge, and hearts lean in. The garden was no longer just a patch of earth. It was a testament to every moment of rekindled connection, every seed of hope that had taken root in the fertile soil of shared vulnerability. Now, when I see a tomato plant stretching its green fingers toward the sky, or a sunflower daring to bloom against the odds, I'm reminded that every day is a chance to plant new dreams. Every scratch of the earth, every drop of rain, every burst of laughter shared in that humble space has become a part of me, a mosaic of moments that, piece by piece, rebuilt a legacy not measured in dollars, but in memories, in love, and in the quiet triumph of rediscovering what it truly means to live. I no longer count my successes in board meetings or celebrate with grand gestures that fade with time. Instead, I celebrate the small victories, a smile shared by a neighbor, a tender word exchanged with a stranger, the joyous exclamation of a child as they discover a hidden blossom amidst a tangle of vines. I have learned that every act of kindness, no matter how small, reverberates far beyond a single moment. It echoes in the lives it touches, in the memories it creates, and in the community it nurtures. As I sit here in the golden light of a late afternoon, with a soft murmur of life surrounding me and the garden pulsating with a renewed energy, I realize that the greatest investment I've ever made wasn't in companies or real estate. It was in the simple, slow-growing things that fill our lives with meaning. The lost years, the opportunities missed, the regrets I once harbored are slowly dissolving in the warmth of shared purpose. I embrace the imperfections, the wild growth, and the unpredictable nature of life, knowing that every day offers a chance for redemption, every moment an opportunity to reconnect with the core of what. Thank you for watching. Share with friends and hit the subscribe.